Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are digging into something we're calling the Great Intellectual Property Auction. I mean, the premise here, based on the sources you've gathered, is pretty stark. It seems like Hollywood today isn't so much a thriving industry.
No, not at all. It's more like a high-stakes liquidation sale.
Exactly, a
It's
liquidation.
just a foundational change, really. We're watching these old legacy giants basically collapse.
Yeah.
And their IP, their characters, their stories, their entire history is just being parceled out and sold off.
So our mission today is to get into the details of that transformation. We're going to focus on, I guess, three main areas. The power shifts in streaming, especially with Netflix. The just stunning collapse of old moneymakers like pay-per-view.
And the new corporate giants, these massive new companies like TKO Group Holdings that are just building empires by snapping up these distressed cultural assets.
Okay, so let's start with Netflix. You can't really talk about this without starting there.
Yeah.
The volume king.
Absolutely. The data is it's staggering. Netflix releases more than 700 titles a year. That's across everything. Films, animation, documentaries, you name it. And that output has made them pretty much the most popular TV network on the planet.
Man, that massive output. That's the whole strategy, right? It's not about having one single must-watch show.
That's it. It's about having 100 things that are just good enough.
Good enough to keep you from hitting cancel.
Exactly right. Reed Hastings, the co-founder, spent, 25 years focused only on that, just luring you in with original content. He always resisted buying a big rival studio or going all in on movie theaters. It was just a single-minded, relentless push for volume.
But, that can't last forever. Every empire hits a wall eventually. If they won by just being aggressive and focused, where are the limits now?
Well, the sources suggest they're hitting a financial ceiling, a price ceiling. Despite all that content, the market is showing that Netflix is getting close to a short-term peak in its power to just keep hiking prices.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, think about it. How many of your friends would finally cancel if it went up another, $2 or $3?
That's the question they're facing. The content might keep you there, but the price is where you start doing the math.
Yeah.
And the second big challenge is finding new users.
Right. The growth problem.
Yep. They're shifting focus to ad-supported subscriptions, especially in lower-income markets globally. And that's a much tougher game. You're not just competing with Disney anymore. You're competing with TikTok, with YouTube, for both eyeballs and ad dollars.
So the easy growth is over. Now it's a fight for every single user and for less money per user.
And volume alone can't solve that problem.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If Netflix won by building this new world, then the legacy studios like Paramount, they're losing because their old world is just completely collapsing around them.
It is, and we have the perfect example of that, a massive deal that really proves this transition is happening right now.
This is the UFC deal.
This is the deal that signals the official death of their old revenue streams. We're talking about the agreement between the UFCA, a modern content powerhouse, and Paramount streaming service. In August 2025, the UFC signed a 7-year, $7.7 billion media rights deal with Paramount Skydance.
$7.7 billion. It's an enormous bet on a single sport.
It is, but it's the how that's revolutionary. Under this deal, all the big UFC-numbered events, they're going to stream exclusively on Paramount Plus in the U.S. And here's the kicker. They are moving completely away from the pay-per-view model.
Wait, so no more $80 fight nights? It's just included with your subscription?
No extra charge, it's included.
So you're telling me Paramount spent almost $8 billion to buy this huge asset, and then they immediately killed the one thing that made it so profitable in the first place? Why would they do that?
Because they're trading volatility for stability.
Okay, explain that.
Think about it. A PPV event costs you, $80, $90? That's huge margin for the UFC. But it's a gamble. Some people buy it, but most people don't. Paramount is giving up that huge one-night windfall for something that's way more valuable now. Guaranteed subscribers who don't leave.
They're doing the math and saying that $7.7 billion is worth it if it stops people from canceling, if it keeps them paying that $15 every single month for 7 years.
Precisely. The CEO of TKO Group even called the PPV model outdated. I mean, this is a huge shift. Back in 2015, over 40% of the UFC's revenue came from those PPV buys. Paramount bought the cash cow and immediately changed its diet.
And this just highlights how desperate these legacy studios are. There was that one statistic in the sources. It felt like an obituary, really. Broadcast TV has lost over 50% of its viewers in a decade.
Over 50%. That's the whole house of cards. The business model that propped up Hollywood for half a century, it's basically gone. That $7.7 billion deal isn't Paramount being strong. It's Paramount being desperate for stable, live content to prop up its own shakel platform. They're trading their burning house for the UFC's fan base.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because that fan base isn't just owned by the UFC anymore. It's this massive, merged corporate entity behind them.
Right, you have to look at the corporate architecture. The UFC is now controlled by TKO Group Holdings. It's a new public company that was formed in September 2023.
And that was the merger of the UFC and WWE, the wrestling profession.
Exactly. And the majority owner of this whole new giant is Endeavor, the same group that first bought the UFC's parent company, Zuffa, way back in 2016 for about $4 billion.
So this is all about consolidation. Endeavor buys the UFC for $4 billion, merges it with WWE to create TKO. I mean, that level of vertical control over cultural assets is just immense.
And when you get that big, you start attracting a different kind of attention, scrutiny, especially over labor and competition. The fascinating part is that this whole corporate expansion was happening while the UFC was defending itself against multiple class action lawsuits.
Alleging what, exactly?
Monopolistic practices, suppressed fighter wages. The lawsuits and the corporate growth were happening at the exact same time.
So how does that connect? The expansion and the legal pressure.
It all comes back to that consolidated power. The core argument in the antitrust cases, like Lou versus Zuffa, was always about the revenue split.
Yeah.
And when you see the numbers side by side with other sports, it's pretty shocking.
Give us the hard numbers.
Okay, so UFC fighters have traditionally received a much lower share of revenue. We're talking about 16 to 22%.
16 to 22.
Right. Now compare that to athletes in the NBA or MLB or the NHL. They share roughly half 50% of league revenues with the owners.
Wow. So for every dollar the UFC makes, the fighter gets about 20 cents, while a basketball player gets 50 cents.
It's a massive difference, and the argument in the lawsuits is that this is only possible because the UFC allegedly built an illegal monopoly, preventing fighters from having any real leverage.
And while TKO was being formed and these multi-billion-dollar deals were being signed, they were also settling these claims.
They were. In February 2025, they got final approval for a $375 million settlement in that first case. It was paid out to over 1,200 fighters who competed in a specific time frame.
But that doesn't end the scrutiny, right? That settlement covers a period that's years in the past now.
Correct. There's a second related lawsuit that covers 2017 to the present, and it's still unresolved. So even as TKO expands, their business model, which again allegedly relies on suppressing labor costs, is still under this intense, ongoing legal fire.
So let's try to tie this all together. We've got Netflix's strategy hitting a price wall, we have Paramount spending a fortune just to buy stability, and we have the sheer corporate scale of TKO needed to manage all this. But what does it mean for the actual IP, the content itself?
Well, this is the biggest takeaway for you to think about. That IP, that skeleton that Netflix and the others are buying, it's a ticking clock.
See, I always thought of a big franchise as like a permanent vault of money. But the sources say something very different.
They absolutely do. This is the hidden financial time bomb. Content libraries structurally depreciate by about 7 to 12% per year unless you are actively renewing it, franchising it, making sequels.
So IP is basically a perishable good. It has an expiration date.
Precisely. And that's what forces these massive defensive deals like the one Paramount made. They have to inject fresh, non-depreciating content into their library. And what doesn't depreciate? Live sports. That UFC content acts like a stabilizer, stopping the rest of their library from just fading away into irrelevance.
Which brings it all back to the financial pressure. If your assets are always expiring, you need constant massive growth to afford the new stuff you need to buy to replace it.
And that's where the final number is a real gut punch. We talked about Netflix's growth ceiling, but this applies to everyone. The streaming market's compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, is projected to be only around 2% through 2030.
Wait, 2%? The whole market is only growing at 2%. How is that sustainable with these multi-billion-dollar deals?
It's not. 2% is basically stagnation in a field that needs hypergrowth to survive. The gold rush is over. Now it's trench warfare. If the market isn't growing, you can't build an audience organically. You have to buy one.
Like the UFC's fan base.
Exactly. You're forced to buy massive established audiences just to keep your own head above water. You have to buy growth instead of building it.
Okay, so to recap the big insights here. We started with Netflix, the volume king, but now they're hitting a price wall. Then we saw the $7.7 billion Paramount deal as the definitive end of the pay-per-view model, a desperate move for stability.
And we saw how that requires this massive corporate entity, TKO, which is big enough to control all that IP while fighting off these serious ongoing labor disputes about its business model.
And we've established that this IP is constantly expiring, losing value every year, while the whole market is stagnant at just 2% growth.
So the final question for you to really think about is this. In an era where cultural assets expire like groceries, and corporate giants merge to control everything and minimize what they pay their labor, who is ultimately paying the true price for the content you stream, beyond just your monthly fee?
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the business of Hollywood's new skeleton.
See you next time.